We've got Yoël Frank.
I'm pretty sure he's just trolling.
Whatever. You know what? I'm going to call you Joel. There we go.
Joël.
we have Yoël Frank from the Barefoot Disciple, who's written this fantastic book here. And Grace and I are going to pick your brain for a few minutes.
Actually,
Forward to it.
Yeah. Could you give
Hard
us a
chat.
rundown?
Yes. Give us a
Okay.
rundown of your book.
Pretty much. What do you talk about?
So our culture gives us a bunch of toxic traits around money: the consumer, the hoarder, the speculator, and this book is sort of a way to reclaim your disciple identity with money. Through a bunch of mini money habits. So it's 5 money habits for modern disciples. So that's sort of the big ideas. It's how to
Nice.
That's awesome.
detox.
Now, I see you're riffing on the Barefoot Investor kind of vibe.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
the little difference there?
Well,
Obviously, aside from being Christian.
And being the Barefoot Disciple.
Yeah, I was mopping the floors at my startup, and I started listening to audiobooks, and I listened through a lot of good ones, and then I listened to the Barefoot Investor to find out what my non-finance degree friends thought about personal finance.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a communications masterpiece.
Yeah.
Being simple, funny, actionable. And I just immediately thought, what I've heard about money in church was patchy
Yeah.
at best, and it focused on giving, but I felt like there are these other really big, important areas of our money lives that often we don't talk about at church, and we certainly don't learn the practical tips. And then a lot of the practical stuff comes from secular sources, which can be really good, but there's a different mindset. Sometimes, I guess, the call of discipleship leads you in a different path to wealth accumulation. I think a lot of the habits are some of the habits are the same, but some of them are different. And there's a different goal. So I think about, secular personal finance books often focusing on wealth accumulation, early retirement, financially independent, retire early.
Yeah.
Whereas, I think that comes from a different mindset around money, even, around work, that you want to kind of parachute out of work. And then that's the goal. Whereas I see, I can see that the Greeks would have liked that. They would have liked to, sit around holidaying and
Vibe out. Hedonism time.
thinking.
Yeah.
But the Hebrews kind of, apparently worked in paradise. I guess I think lead on different paths.
100%.
Yeah.
What's something that you would kind of try, if you had one message that you could really just tell Christian youth today, what would kind of be your main warnings, I guess?
Like with regards to personal finances.
Oh, yeah, like just even like an attitude in it, or like personally.
Major corporations, if you don't set a plan, major corporations will set a plan for you, and their plan for you will to be live as a consumer, as your primary identity, and they'll keep you on a consumer treadmill for most of your life running, and you'll be, you'll feel behind, and that will suck the spiritual life out of lots of people, a lot of well-intended people. And so that would be kind of, I guess, a heads up about that. That's by design. It doesn't kind of happen by accident. But I would also say, if you don't have a lot of money, and you're young, good. What you have is the ability to form habits that are super powerful and can get you on a path with money that, put yourself on autopilot. The ability to start little and often, faithful and little, faithful and much, is habit language in a lot of ways. Something that Jesus said. So those ability to start at this at a youth, I'm so grateful for a few little conversations that got me, that helped me when I was a teenager with money.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And like, I know, like I'm in my late 20s
Yep.
now, and I've only just discovered, you know, how to hack my finances, which is quite embarrassing discovering it a little bit later on. I've got so much, you know, like hex debt and stuff like that, which I'm actively working towards getting rid of. But it's really hard. And like, it's that kind of like, I wish I had known that there were other options for me coming out of high school, that university may not necessarily be for everybody, and that's okay. But like, in terms of like, say someone is like me and they've accumulated quite a bit of debt by no fault of their own. Do you have any tips for people like that?
Good question.
Well, even as well, should paying off debt be a Christian priority?
Yeah.
I think that there's good debt and bad debt. We're more familiar with bad debt. Bad debt is going on a holiday that you can't afford.
Yeah.
And get your future self to pay the bill for it.
Yeah.
And keep dialing that up with lots of little consumer experiences that are here today and gone tomorrow. And burden your future self into debt and to paying sometimes high interest on that debt, and get you into a mentality with money that is impulsive.
Yeah.
That, you know, wants it now. You know, even from your joy, like anticipation is often greater than
the actual experience.
thing.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, like, people that get in a habit of delayed gratification, actually tap into. We think that they're crazy because they passed it up in the moment, but actually, for them, they're often getting these little hits that, you know, they're enjoying the future thing that they're working towards in the present. So I guess bad debt would be anything that doesn't pay for itself in the future. And I got that from Alex Cook.
Yes.
Wealth with Purpose. And so when you're talking about assets, that's kind of easy. So maybe a house. I mean, it's become impractical in modern Australia to buy your own house without debt. So that's become a reality for almost everybody. That doesn't mean that that doesn't mean your banker is your friend and the amount that they tell you to lend is the amount that would lead you on the path to life. Because they're still incentivized to keep you on that treadmill. But so debt that could pay for itself. So I guess student debt, you know, hex debt is one of those things that people that study something could lead to something in a future career that could pay for themselves, and often is for some people, but it just depends in the moment. It's not for everybody.
Well, evidently
for
not. I
everyone.
mean, unless there are people like me that have gone through several career changes since leaving high school, and you know, eventually find yourself on the path that God wants you instead, and it just happens to not be the path that you studied in. So I guess you do kind of have to pay for it, don't you?
Yeah. A question, some principles in regard to like finance for youth, like giving to one's church. How much should someone give to their church?
So, biblically, I think that there isn't a 10% mandate in the New Testament. However, anyone who's ever set a goal before, i.e. most people, and failed, you've probably failed because you didn't make it smart.
Right.
Specific, realistic. Well, I don't know what A stands for.
Achievable. Yeah. Realistic.
Something and time bound.
Yeah.
Limited. I don't know. Coming up with stuff.
And so if you set like your goal for giving as generosity.
Yeah.
That sounds real fluffy to me, and that sounds real fluffy to you.
Yeah.
And so for me, first 10% giving, 10% is a specific, realistic, achievable, time-bound goal that has some historical, biblical historical precedent. It was different, they had some of their tax system, the tax system we pay now would probably cover some of the tithes, and not all of the tithes. There were multiple tithes of different things. So it's not, but yeah, I think I call it first 10%.
Yeah.
Because think about the GST. You pay tax in every transaction to the government. Well, you can first 10%. You can pay the first fruits of your income into a. Talk about how to do that if you guys are interested. But I think that little and often principle of first 10%, I think is super powerful.
So it's not a bound rule, but it's helpful, just a helpful guideline for us today, because to be generous is a little bit abstract these days.
It can be, especially in the economy that we are living in. Times are getting tougher. There's no denying that. But I guess, I kind of bring it down to, like, what is your heart motivation behind it too? Are you giving stingy because, that's fine, 10%. But if you have the ability to give more, then go for it. And if it's not going to be detrimental to other parts of your life,
True.
then go for it. But if you can't, then I guess, what are you going to do?
Do you have any general wisdom in regard to someone looking to buy a house, say by some stroke of God's kindness?
Yes,
they don't have any
possible.
other debt. They've got a nice job. Are there some principles that you recommend before seeking a house?
Yeah. In Australia, we have evidently an idolatry around home ownership for people above often certain ages. So we often flip from a tourist mentality to, I'm here to take a few snaps, have a good time, to then an owner mentality. It belongs to me. I need to own something. And so that owner mentality, I think, so both of those mentalities, I think, be harmful. I think scriptures lay out a temporary resident mentality to say, hey, this isn't, even if I have a title deed, even if I quote unquote own it, you don't.
Yeah.
It's not our land. It's God's land.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's not practical. I know, but that's kind of a mentality to bring into thinking about home ownership. And I would just to follow on that, I would think about being a home missionary. Yeah. So I think about home ownership as a missional decision. And so that so houses have multiple components. They have a basic shelter. It's a basic necessity. They also have a luxury consumer component to it. And so, like, one way to think about if you're going to enter the market is how much you're going to pay on the consumer component of that. That's a consumer product versus your banker's not your friend. Even if you do have friends that are bankers, they could be lovely people. But their plan for you is not a discipleship plan. Their plan for you is to keep you on a treadmill of debt for as long as possible. And that's what profits the organisation that they work for. And so I would encourage her as a second thing is to think about, can you seek advice from somebody who is not incentivized to laden you with as much debt as possible,
right?
To talk about a housing decision. So something modest, that's lower than what they tell you can borrow.
Yes.
I think is a good start, and to have the missional lens of so practically buy versus rent.
Yeah.
right? If you think about a chainsaw or a mountain bike, examples from the weekend I was just on, people gave. If you rent them, if you rented them from a day or a week, it's probably better to rent.
Yeah.
But there would be a certain timeline for which would make more sense to buy. And usually that's because there's a less middle people that need to make money when, so the person who owns it and then you who lives in it and then the rent, sometimes they own it with finance as well. So it's usually in the long term cheaper to buy basically any asset.
Yeah.
But
it's also long term.
So if you were trying to buy a chainsaw for 1 week and then flip and then sell it, like it'd probably cost you more in your time. But if you push that timeline out long enough,
you're making more.
Yeah. So there's a couple of a bit of a mindset to be a temporary resident, not an owner, and then be a home missionary versus a homeowner, and then with your banker. I also think there's other practical things, but
Well, that's it. You just have to read the book, don't you?
or borrow it. Don't feed the thing, or email me and get a free e-copy.
Well, that's awesome.
Insider tip.
It's a full-purpose book. So
that's so
when I
cool.
talk at church, they give away all proceeds to their mission partners.
Oh, that's lovely.
So I don't want to be. And I was on the weekend. Somebody was interested in the book and was trying to get their life. They're trying to spend less, trying to get back on the horse, and I was like, "Don't buy it." I was like, "I'll send you a copy. I get author copies of the audio book.
Right.
I'll send you a copy.
Awesome.
Of that.
Well, that's so cool. Okay, well, so then
Open invite.
Okay, well, I mean, if people are wanting to say, maybe not necessarily to get a copy of the book, but to get in touch with you, maybe for tips and stuff like that, what's the best way to get in touch?
I have a Facebook page.
Yeah.
I realise that may not go down well with this demographic. Like, what's that? I'm showing my age here. But there's an Instagram as well, but I don't have that on my phone. I don't know how that works.
Yeah, fair.
So if you go to facebook.com/the Barefoot Disciple, and you click like or follow, you'll help the algorithm, if nothing else, and give you periodic little nuggets of sometimes wisdom about money stuff. So that's my main blog as well. There is an Instagram account that's very neglected, Barefoot XTIAN. It is, nice. And then there's a website, barefootdisciple.com.
Cool. Well,
awesome. Yep.
That's awesome. Well, I know I'll probably be borrowing the book that you gave to Neil.
Love
because,
to hear it.
Saving money. Look, Yoël, it has been so good to chat with you. Thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you heaps.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me on.
Vision 180.
Live different.
Different.